Hello, I'm Carol McNeil. This is CBC News Network. Our top story tonight. Westjet is shutting down most of its operations in Atlantic Canada.
It's devastating news for our region. It's a significant impact.
Westjet is cutting 80% of its flights in and out of Atlantic Canada. Service to cities include Moncton and Charlottetown being eliminated. There are more than 1,500 new cases of COVID-19 in Ontario and Quebec. We'll have the latest on the pandemic here in Canada. Plus, disturbing violence in the dispute over First Nations lobster harvest in Nova Scotia. People vandalized vehicles and attacked two facilities where Mi'kmaq fishermen were storing their catch. We begin with the bad news from Canada's beleaguered air travel sector. Westjet says it will soon stop or scale back most of its operations in Atlantic Canada. The Calgary-based airline will also cut at least 100 jobs, and that's on top of the 4,000 workers it has laid off since March. This comes as the airline grapples with a sharp drop in demand during the coronavirus pandemic. Jacqueline Hansen has the details.
Breaking into or out of the Atlantic bubble will soon get more difficult.
The lack of travel demand, combined with domestic quarantines, means that sadly, we can no longer maintain our full Canadian network of service.
As of November 2nd, Westjet will no longer fly from St. John's to Toronto or from Halifax to Ottawa. And the airline is suspending all flights out of Moncton, Fredericton, Sydney, Charlottetown, and Quebec City.
Although it is disappointing, I'm not totally surprised by the announcement, to be honest. The demand is simply not there for them to carry passengers at this moment, given the current travel restrictions and the conditions with the pandemic.
The Atlantic bubble has largely been seen as a public health success story. By keeping travelers out or requiring them to quarantine for 2 weeks upon arrival, Atlantic Canada has kept its COVID cases down. But the restrictions have other consequences.
If they pushed that thought forward, they would have said, well, we might be shutting down our airlines.
Despite expectations of more support to come from the federal government for the airline industry, this professor expects the return of service to smaller communities to be slow.
The airlines are going to go to on the routes where the money is. The smaller communities, they're probably, many of them were losing money or at best breaking even money, even in the good times. And so I think there'll be a much more hard-nosed approach post-pandemic to looking at the potential profitability.
Westjet says it is committed to returning to Atlantic Canada when the situation improves. In the meantime, passengers whose flights are canceled will get a Westjet travel credit, but no refunds. Jacqueline Hansen, CBC News, Toronto.
Let's get some reaction from the industry. Joining me from St. John's is Monette Pasher. She is the executive director of the Atlantic Canada Airports Association. It's a nonprofit industry association representing all the airports in the region. Monette, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Carol.
What's your reaction to today's news?
Yeah, today's news was pretty devastating for our sector. To hear that 80% of WestJet's flights would be canceled in our region certainly wasn't unexpected. I think, we've been seeing the demand and the decline and the cancellation of flights for some time now with the Atlantic bubble and the pandemic travel restrictions. So, yeah, not unexpected, but certainly very challenging.
In what way will it be challenging? Spell that out for us. The importance of air travel for the region.
For sure. I think when you think about Atlantic Canada, we're geographically disconnected from the rest of Canada. You can't just jump in the car and go to Toronto. So in order to do business here, we need to be connected, and our mobile workforce for the oil industry needs to be connected, and our IT sector needs to be connected. So when we move to the recovery side or the other side of this pandemic, we really need air service in our region. It's essential to live here and to do business here.
Yeah, WestJet today also casts blame on fee increases from airports. Take a listen.
What has made this situation even more difficult is that 5 of the airports we currently serve in Atlantic Canada are part of a larger group of airports that have announced substantial fee increases.
Which 5 is he referring to?
Yeah, there's actually 7 airports in our region and a number from across the country that have had to announce the increase of fees. It's certainly not a decision our airports take lightly. In our region, there'd be Halifax, Sydney, Moncton, St. John, Deer Lake, and St. John's have all announced fee increases. And really, it's the model. It's the airport model in Canada. While it's a good model, it's based on user fees. And we're operating in a time where there are no users, and we're an essential service that have to be here for medevac, to move cargo, to move essential workers, and the costs just don't scale. So at a time where we have no revenue, we have large fixed costs, and there just isn't that revenue to support that. So this was a decision that none of our airports took lightly, but we're going on to 8 months into this pandemic, and we've certainly said that time has come for support.
Yeah, so these fee increases, though, have resulted in practically the shutdown of an entire airline in the Atlantic region.
I think you could say that there's been a number of factors that have led to this decision today. I think having government-imposed travel restrictions and 14-day quarantine restrictions in our region that are amongst the most severe in the country, I think no one would argue the health impacts of that, but they are decisions and they impact sectors. They've impacted our tourism industry greatly and our airlines and our airports. So this is part of those decisions, and I think that's what we're seeing here today.
What do you think needs to be done now?
We've been calling for government support for our sector-specific support. Our airports need operational support. Early in the pandemic, the U.S. government has come out with $10 billion for their airports to help them operationally get through this difficult time. We'd like to see the same in terms of operational support, no interest loans. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is in a good year, Canada's airports in tax, and they pay federal rent to the federal government of $330 million a year. And, you know, these are bad times, and we need the federal government's support for our essential industry.
Do you think you might, in the wake of Westjet's decision, some of those airports back off on those fees or renegotiate those fees with the airlines?
The challenging part about those fee increases is they're related to safety-related infrastructure for some of our small airports. So you take an airport like Sydney in Nova Scotia, they have an essential runway that they have to rehab in the next year. That's a $10 million investment. It took them, nearly a decade to save up the cash for that project, and they've almost burned through that entire amount this year alone. So I think these are decisions, they're massive decisions. They're not taken lightly, but with the lack of users in our system, I don't think we're going to see these fee reversals.
All right. Monette, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Monette Pasher is the Executive Director of the Atlantic Canada Airports Association. To the latest on the coronavirus itself in Canada now, Ontario recorded 721 new cases of COVID-19 today, and officials are now putting in place restrictions on how